Lunchables and similar kinds of lunch kits are simply not healthy for kids.
The FDA's food failure. It details how the agency has fallen flat on food safety and nutrition.
Food is really not a high priority at FDA.
Kids with high sodium intakes are about 40% more likely to develop hypertension than those with low sodium diets.
A machine with a dozen syringes injects a liquid into the lumps of pork meat.
High sodium levels.
We look at the raw data and analyze it ourselves at the FDA. The food industry does massive amounts of research that we have no access to. And we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what's guiding their decisions. And it would be a lot better if the research that was done on human beings by the food industry was made public.
Toxic elements in baby food.
Our test of these kits found concerning sodium levels and harmful chemicals that can contribute to serious health problems over time.
Food. The fuel for all living beings. Or I can say, the most underrated fuel for us humans. Many of us think that something that can be eaten is simply food. But is that true? Well, we may be a bit unsure about that, but our body isn't. It is affected by both quality and quantity of food. In this video, we are mainly focusing on the quality of food that we put in our mouth every single day. Speaking of quality, what if I told you that the food you eat every day is part of the system designed to keep you hooked, unhealthy, and misinformed? The food industry doesn't just sell you food, it sells you lies. From addictive ingredients to hidden chemicals, misleading labels, and even government-backed scams. You have been tricked into believing what's on a plate is safe. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change the way you look at food forever. It's hard to believe that the nutritional labels on the packet of your cookies or chips can be wrong. Yes, that box of cookies might have a lot more calories than the company is letting you know. The FDA states that the nutritional labels can be up to 20% inaccurate. And if you think these companies will not take advantage of that, then you are in a slight delusion, my friend. With such a large margin of error, we can easily be misled. You may be on the path to restrict calories, or you are trying to monitor the calories you ingest. But you find yourself at the mercy of these companies, who may be spinning the truth or not. How could one be able to assess his or her diet based on the values mentioned on the pack?
I know, great!
You know how often it is to stop eating salty food once you've started. It's all too easy to eat an entire bag of Doritos or Lay's in just one sitting. And there's a reason for that. Back in 2013, the New York Times reported about the strategic calculations that go into recipes for highly processed foods. Their flavors are meant to trick your brain into wanting more. Also, there was another study related to the human brain in Frontiers of Psychology, where researchers let rats choose from 3 different foods: standard chow, a mix of fat and carbohydrates, or potato chips. The rodents by far preferred potato chips over the other 2 options. If it's not just the fat and carbs, what the heck is it? Potato chips are best known for 2 things: salt and fat. The studies have shown that eating salt triggers the release of dopamine, a chemical messenger that controls your brain's pleasure center. Once your brain gets that first reward hit, it starts craving more, and more, and more. When we think of beef or dairy, like milk, cheese, or yogurt, we often picture cows roaming in open fields. But in reality, most cattle in the US spend the last few months of their lives in feedlots, eating a diet that's unnatural to them, mainly made up of corn and soy. While many do graze on pasture early in life, it's usually short-lived. This kind of system can raise concerns about animal health and the potential spread of disease. At the same time, there's a noticeable gap in how agricultural subsidies are distributed. Each year, the US government provides around $38 billion in subsidies to the meat and dairy industries. In contrast, only about 0.4% of that, roughly $17 million, goes to supporting the production of fruits and vegetables. This imbalance doesn't just affect farmers, it shapes what's affordable, accessible, and ultimately what ends up on our plates. The American Heart Association recommends keeping added sugar intake pretty low. About 9 teaspoons a day for men and no more than 6 for women, teens, and kids over the age of 2. But let's be real, the typical American diet doesn't exactly follow the rules. In fact, according to data from 2017 and 18, kids and young adults in the US were consuming an average of 17 teaspoons of added sugar per day. That's nearly triple the recommended amount for so many people. This overload of added sugar comes with serious health risks. It adds a ton of empty calories, which means a lot of energy but barely any nutrients. That makes it harder to stick to healthy eating habits, and over time, it contributes to weight gain, obesity, high blood pressure, and even tooth decay, especially when sugar-sweetened drinks are part of the daily routine. Unlike added sugars and certain fats, the United States doesn't have broad legal limits on the sodium content of most food categories intended for the general population. Federal dietary guidelines provide clear guidance of appropriate sodium intake levels, which are about 2300 milligrams per day for adults. Alarmingly, the average sodium consumption in the United States is around 3400 milligrams per day, significantly exceeding these recommendations. The majority of sodium comes from processed and restaurant foods, rather than from salt added during home cooking. Many commonly consumed foods, even those that may not taste overly salty, can be surprisingly high in sodium. These include processed meats such as bacon, cold cuts, ham, sausage, and frozen breaded meats. The primary health effect associated with diets high in sodium is raised blood pressure, which significantly increases the risk of cardiovascular diseases, including heart disease and stroke. It is estimated that 1.89 million deaths each year globally are associated with consuming too much sodium. In 2010, the US Department of Agriculture reported approximately 133 billion pounds of food wasted, which amounted to $161 billion worth of food. Waste happens across the food industry, whether it's on the agricultural, restaurant, or consumer level. In the US, over 97% of food waste was estimated to be buried in landfills. However, the US is currently trying to cut back on food waste, with the goal of reducing it by 50% by 2030. Then it'll be around 67 billion pounds of food. Considering it 50% less than the former data, then also it's an absurd amount of food wasted. Think about how much of the population could be fed with that food if not wasted carelessly. You may have already heard the litany of chicken horrors.
At that table, the chicken you're making for dinner may actually contain some trace amounts of arsenic. That's the word from the Food and Drug Administration.
The hormones and antibiotics. Arsenic-based drugs were historically used in poultry production to promote growth, improve feed conversion, and enhance meat pigmentation. The fillets are pumped full of salt water to make them seem juicier than they are. Besides that, arsenic is also another cancer-causing agent.
But the agency says the amount is too tiny to be dangerous. That's a good news. New study shows the arsenic comes from an ingredient in chicken feed. Previously, it was thought that arsenic was eliminated with chicken waste.
Even if the amount of it in chicken isn't terribly harmful, the polluted chicken waste can still poison our water and lands.